June 5, 1944. When a tense silence reigned in the Allied headquarters on the southern coast of England, General Dwight Eisenhower finally signed the order that had been in preparation for years. Politicians in London and Washington called it the decisive step. Soldiers, the road to hell. In the military calendar, the document was listed briefly and dryly, Operation Overlord. But everyone who held this order understood. Its execution would change the course of the Second World War. And although on the streets of London and Portsmouth civilians saw only thousands of soldiers, tanks, and trucks, no one yet understood the scale of what was about to begin at dawn the next day. More than 150,000 people were preparing to cross the English Channel, a number Europe had not seen since the time of Napoleon. Eisenhower, a man of icy composure, on the evening of June 5th, looked as if he carried the whole world on his shoulders. He knew that the first step in Normandy would determine everything: the fall of Hitler's power, the liberation of Paris, the outcome of the war. But he also knew that everything could fail in a single day. A storm, German artillery, navigation errors could turn the operation into a disaster similar to Dunkirk, only in reverse. A year before, heated discussions had taken place in the Allied headquarters. Churchill warned the invasion of France would become the bloodiest chapter of the war. He suggested alternatives: strikes in the Balkans, advancement through Italy, encircling Germany through southern Europe. The Americans were adamant. Only a direct strike through France could open a real second front. The British wanted a cautious operation, the Americans a massive strike. Thus, the strategy of Overlord was born: airborne attacks, artillery preparation, infantry waves, Churchill and Sherman tanks, engineer units with flamethrowers and TNT charges. General Montgomery, a man with a reputation as difficult but outstanding, insisted the first goal would be to seize a bridgehead 80 kilometers wide between Utah and Sword. He needed speed and space. It was crucial to prevent German tank divisions from counterattacking the landed units in the first hours. On the other side of the English Channel, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel understood. The Allies would come. It was only a matter of time. He believed the invasion had to be stopped on the beach, in the first minutes. If even a few thousand soldiers established a fortified bridgehead, Germany would lose the war. Rommel ordered the coast of Normandy to be turned into a field of death. Thousands of mines, metal hedgehogs, wooden stakes with explosives, zigzag trenches, fortified positions with MG-42 machine guns. German engineers worked under rain and wind, not knowing which hour would mark the beginning of the end. The night before the landing was strangely quiet. At the airfields of England, hundreds of planes sat on the taxiways, their engines off. But the crews remained inside, as if afraid to step out and disturb the fragile balance of a world that would soon vanish. Among them was Sergeant Thomas Bentley of the U.S. 101st Airborne Division. He held a photograph of his wife and newborn daughter. "If I die," he told his neighbor, "let her know I was here for a reason." But saying it was easy. Jumping at night behind enemy lines, not knowing whether you would meet the ground or bullets, could only be done by someone who had learned to hide fear deep beneath uniform and a steel expression. The pilots of the three-engine Dakotas took off at 10:30 p.m. Thousands of white dots, parachutists, descended into the darkness over Normandy. Many were blown by the wind into flooded fields, drowning before they could free themselves from the lines. Others landed directly in front of German patrols who opened fire on the invisible silhouettes. But those who were lucky gathered into units, blew up bridges, and disrupted communication between German forces. In the first 2 hours, the Allies lost hundreds of men. But it was these airborne soldiers who achieved the impossible. They disrupted German defenses at the decisive moment. At dawn on June 6th, the artillery barrage began. British battleships and American cruisers opened fire on the coast. The ground trembled beneath the feet of German soldiers. But many fortifications remained intact. Concrete bunkers reliably protected the MG-42 crews. The first wave of the landing headed toward the shore. Young soldiers from the 29th and 1st American Divisions peered at the foggy strip of coastline. Corporal James Connolly, whom friends called Brooklyn, tried to joke, "If I get home, the first thing I'll do is eat a huge ice cream." No one smiled. The landing craft hit the waves and the troops tried to jump out, but German machine guns struck them in the face. At Omaha, the water instantly turned red. Many soldiers drowned under the weight of their gear. Some clung to anti-tank hedgehogs just trying to breathe. Lieutenant Arthur Miller, a school teacher from California, saw his radio operator fall beside him. He wanted to help, but MG-42 fire erupted again and sand exploded at his feet. Miller rushed forward as if forgetting the hell around him. At that moment, he understood only one thing. If he stopped, his men would die on another beach. Gold. The British advanced under heavy fire. But here, their specialized armored tanks, General Hobart's funnies, amphibious vehicles, mine-clearing tanks with plows, flamethrower tanks, entered the scene. This engineering vanguard saved dozens of lives. On one of the landing craft sat a gunner named William Harding. He was from Liverpool and had worked on the docks before the war. He complained to his friends about the rain, the damp, the poor tea. But now, as the craft hit the shore, Harding moved first, as if he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. To him, war was a place where a man could finally see who he truly was. At Utah, the situation was different. Due to a navigation error, American units landed 2 kilometers south of the planned point. General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., 56 years old and suffering from arthritis, said the historic phrase. "We landed not where we planned, but we'll start the war from here." And the soldiers advanced, as if this mistake were part of the plan. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in the German headquarters. Communications were poor. Many officers believed the landing was a feint, and that the real invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais. Rommel was in Germany at his wife's birthday. Hitler was asleep and had forbidden him to be woken. When reality became clear, it was too late. Tank divisions moved toward Normandy too slowly, and the Allies had already established a bridgehead. By noon, tens of thousands of soldiers were on the shore. Many beaches were still under fire. But wave after wave, the Allies broke through German defenses. Sergeant Thomas Bentley of the 101st Division, who had jumped at night, later wrote in his diary, "When dawn broke, I saw the sky, and below it, the sea and thousands of ships, and I realized, no one can stop us now, not today, not tomorrow." Thus ended the first hours of the day that changed the world. But ahead lay an entire Europe. By noon on June 6th, there was no sense in searching for order along the Normandy coast. The beaches had turned into chaos, destroyed landing craft, vehicles riddled with bullets, bodies of soldiers, overturned tanks, overloaded tents torn apart where someone had tried to hide from the fire. But despite this chaos, the Allies continued moving forward. General Montgomery received the first reports from the front and, reviewing them, realized that the operation was unfolding differently from the textbooks. Some units at Omaha were practically destroyed, but others, having survived the hell of the beach, pushed up the slopes. At Utah, the Americans advanced unexpectedly quickly. The British at Sword reached the Conn Highway, though they could not connect with the paratroopers holding the bridges over the Orne. The situation was paradoxical. The Allies were experiencing tragedy and success at the same time. Inside France, a few kilometers from the shore, the awakened residents of Normandy heard the continuous roar of cannon fire. For them, the war had been nearby for 4 years. But now its sound had changed. It seemed to come from the sea, and it was relentless, heavy, oppressive. In the village of Le Mesnil-Monfroy, a man named Etienne Rousseau, a farmer who had lost his brother in the early months of the German occupation, looked up at the sky and saw a group of planes dropping parachute crates. He ran into the yard and saw an American soldier stuck in the trees. The soldier was desperately trying to free himself. Etienne helped him, risking being shot if any Germans saw the soldier, young with a bloodied cheek, said in English, "Thank you, Father, thank you." Etienne did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He nodded and pointed toward the direction from which the gunfire came. These small encounters, which never make it into textbooks, shaped the fate of the operation no less than the decisions of generals. Meanwhile, on the shore, Lieutenant Arthur Miller, who had survived the slaughter at Omaha, stood at the edge of a cliff and looked down. The beach was still under fire, but streams of soldiers continued climbing upward. Miller ran his hand across his face, wiping away blood, someone else's hoy, and sand. His platoon had lost half its men. "Keep moving," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself. They passed through a field of craters, charred remnants of fortifications, and rushing medics. Every step deeper into France felt like stepping onto another planet. But on their path, German units were already moving. Hitler was still asleep, but the generals, without waiting for orders, began assembling reserves. General Dolman's 7th Army received a report, landing in Normandy, Maine. This was what the German command feared most. If the Allies secured a foothold, it would be the end for them. In Carentan, soldiers of the 6th Parachute Regiment of the Wehrmacht took positions in broken houses. The streets were empty, windows closed. They knew the Americans were coming. Small groups that had dispersed across the fields at night were now regrouping and forming squads. The commander of a German squad, Unteroffizier Wilhelm Krauss, sat in the doorway of a ruined warehouse, smoking his last cigarette. He was from Cologne and had spent too many years in the war to believe in victory. "If they take Carentan," he told his friend Joseph, "the war will end faster than Berlin thinks." Joseph nodded. Neither of them believed in miracles, but they were soldiers and they followed orders. The bluish morning of June 6th gradually turned into a growing storm of battles. At Saffville, on the outskirts of the Caen direction, British tank crews clashed with remnants of the Wehrmacht's 21st Panzer Division. The fight lasted only 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes cost dozens of lives. Lieutenant William Harding, a former dock worker from Liverpool, now sat in the turret of a Churchill tank. Through the periscope, he saw German soldiers running between houses. Suddenly, a German anti-tank gun struck the left flank. An Allied tank nearby erupted in flames. Harding felt the world shaking around him and ordered the gunner to open fire. It was not a cinematic battle, it was a roaring duel of machines and fear. But the British prevailed. Not because they were stronger, but because thousands of new vehicles were arriving from the sea. The Germans had no such reserve, yet the real tragedies happened where there were no tanks, no ships, only small groups of soldiers deciding the fate of the entire day. In the marshes around Sainte-Mère-Église, paratroopers of the 82nd Division waded through water up to their chests. Some carried the wounded, others bundles of grenades, radios, ammunition. Sergeant Thomas Bentley, still holding the photograph of his wife, kept his carbine above the water to avoid wetting the bolt. His legs sank into the mud. Each step was a struggle. He heard gunfire ahead and knew they were walking straight into it. "We have to link up with the 101st, he told his men. "If we don't gather together, we'll be destroyed one by one." But German machine gunners stood in their way. They cut through the fog with bursts that stripped leaves from trees and sent fountains of water flying. Several Americans fell into the marsh muck and never got up. Bentley felt his foot stuck in the mud. He jerked and pulled out his boot with a whole chunk of sticky muck. At that moment, a machine gun fired again. The bullet passed just inches from his head. "Forward!" Bentley shouted. "Only forward!" They broke through, and a few hours later joined other groups. This small breakthrough became one of the reasons the Germans could not encircle the paratroopers. While infantry units died in the fields and streets of French towns, Allied officers read new reports. Omaha holding, Utah advanced. Gold expanding the bridgehead. Sword, heavy losses, but holding. Montgomery ordered pressure on Caen to be increased. Eisenhower, receiving a report of heavy American losses, said a phrase later quoted in all biographies. "The price is high, but tomorrow will demand even more above Normandy." Thousands of planes roared. They dropped ammunition, medical supplies, water. Pilots saw below them the black flashes of anti-aircraft fire and burning houses, but they also saw German columns moving toward the shore and opened fire, dropping bombs on the roads. Each such attack delayed German reserves by hours, and those hours saved lives. On the outskirts of the Caen direction, a small group of British commandos encountered fierce resistance. Senior Sergeant John MacLeod, a Scot with a thick accent and stern demeanor, led the head group. They moved toward a bridge that had to be held until the main forces arrived. The Germans opened fire from an old mill building. Several commandos fell. MacLeod threw a smoke grenade and charged forward. He was wounded in the shoulder but kept moving. He knew that if they did not take the bridge, the tanks would not get through. When the fight ended, only 17 of the 30-man group remained. The bridge was captured, but the cost was terrible. Yet the most crucial moment came closer to evening. American forces at Utah and French resistance partisans jointly blocked the road where part of the German 91st Infantry Division was supposed to pass. This became one of the key moments of the day. The German forces that could have struck the landing's rear were stuck in forests and villages. One of the Frenchmen, a young boy named Antoine, only 17, later said, "I didn't feel like a hero. I just didn't want Normandy to die." Simple words, but they reflected the essence of that day. By the evening of June 6th, over 130,000 Allies were on the shore, and although ahead lay the battle for Caen, Carentan, Saint-Lô, for every road and every house, the most important thing had already happened. The bridgehead had been established. The Germans could not push the Allies back into the sea. The war in the West was beginning anew. And now it was moving straight toward Berlin. By the end of June 6th, the Allies held 5 beaches. It was a victory, heavy, bloody, hard-won. In the photographs from the end of the day, not heroes from movies, but real faces, tired, covered in mud, yet with the gaze of people who had achieved the impossible. They did not think of glory. They thought of surviving, of their families, of home, of the future they had just helped reclaim. And if Europe stands at peace today, it entered that peace through those beaches. Omaha, Utah, gold, Juno, sword. Where thousands of soldiers stepped toward death for the freedom of others, D-Day is not just a date. It is a symbol that even in the darkest moments of history, people can unite for a common future. The story of these ordinary soldiers is the story of thousands. And remembering them, we remember not only the war, we remember the price of peace.